Okay, this is the third video of the presentation I'm going to read online of this book called World Within a World. And I'm using the tablet this time, which I think will let me read without it cutting off. So I'm going to see how far I get. And in case somebody just happened on to this video, I made a video before this where I already read the foreword and the preface, and I'm not going to hold a book in front of the camera because I can't do that at the same time as I read, and so it's going to be mainly an audio situation. I've never done this before, read a whole book online, but a couple years back I looked all over for a copy of this because I got this copy, as I said in the other videos, in the early 90s from a bookstore and in Washington, United States. And so anyway, I went and so it's in pretty bad shape. It's still readable, but it's always been one of my favorite books, so I've carried it around with me. Anyway, so I went to look it up to see if I could find a copy, and I even contacted Findhorn, and they didn't have it in their bookstore, and I emailed some people that didn't know anything about it, and at that time I don't think I found any copy of this online, so there's a few out there. I worked in a bookstore that's where I bought it from, so anyhow, so I figure, well, I might as well read it and share it. And so I'm gonna, so in the last video, let's see, sorry there's no visual, like fancy pictures and everything to go with it, but oh wow. Okay, so in the last video I was reading the letter from Peter Caddy at Findhorn Foundation where the scripts were originally received. Sorry if I don't talk clear enough in the microphone, but we'll try. And I hope it works out. Okay, and so the video cut off right before the last paragraph of Peter Caddy's letter, the late Peter Caddy. And this was written, this letter from Peter Caddy at Findhorn Foundation, where the scripts originally received, was written February 23rd, 1979. And the last, you have to go hear the other one to hear the whole thing, but the last paragraph says, "Please remember me to Rosamond Lehman. I was most interested in what she wrote about Wellesley Tudor Pole, that's WellesleY Tudorpole, vouching for the prisoner's authenticity and that he already knew about them." Okay, so there's a name there. Yours sincerely, Peter Caddy. Okay, so now I'm going to start reading the main material. And the first, it goes in a journal form, so it's the so-called chapters are by dates. So it starts X7 reporting. December 28, 1953. Wow, okay. Scientists are already aware that we are in an age of increasing revelation and are prepared to study and release their findings at the appointed time. We assure you that each recording made is a step into higher vibrational levels and thus a step forward in the consciousness of man. We are deeply grateful to be called upon to make our report directly to one who can respond to our contact. We have long worked secretly and silently without the use of the spoken word, conveying our meanings one to another by means of thought transmission alone. It is necessary to work thus when trapped, entombed, and under brutal and inhuman restrictions. We do not ask for pity. We are reporting the findings of men who love their God and his reflection in the form of man. We should like to state here that we have cited many of the beautiful flights of color, sound, radiations in our hidden world. We are aware of the command of ships of space and have had contact with their pilots and have come to understand the meaning of their missions. We believe that a vast armada of winged radiations are now preparing to make their descent into and through the Earth levels. Because our work is within the Earth itself, we are able to report our findings as to such radiations, and we do so now in brief. Other revelations will follow at their appointed time. Ours is not to question, but to make known our findings in as concise and scientific a manner as possible. We have been prisoners for many years. We are underground much of the time. We know our appointed mission and have been conducting investigations as to the context and possible usage of the radiations felt, seen, and experienced in test fields by us. We are now preparing to release such in formula to the one who is ready to make such recordings. We believe they will revolutionize the life of man upon the planet Earth, for he will find available through such formulas the material for fruitful, effortless, and spontaneous existence upon his planet. The cure for every known disease is within these findings, but he must be ready to accept them. Our contacts are many. We know the threat to the very life of the planet. We respond under direction to the calls made upon us, and we give thanks that we may do so. We begin. Out from the very heart of the universe, the great potential power, deified as the Supreme Being, come the great radiations, vast in quantity, endlessly increasing in degree and potential as awareness of them becomes an integral part of the beings receptive to them. This means beings on all the planets known as the universe of God. As these radiations are felt and recognized, they take on color and form according to the interpretation of the mind receiving them. We speak now of a collective mind, not that of an individual. It is well to bear in consciousness that mind is the substance acted upon, that which is receptive, malleable, resilient, and which gives form to undifferentiated substance. The inherent potentials within the rays or radiations from the great Godhead are all the qualities of being, but primarily the two most potent aspects are those of love and wisdom. These two are equally balanced and divided into the respective qualities inherent within each of the two major rays. They go out in the form of radiations of color sound, these potentials being synonymous. That which is known to you as sound gives off color according to the degree of the radiation. We thus bring you to an awareness of the light as it is radiated from the Godhead, and as it is apprehended in its greater and lesser aspects. We see that love and wisdom are the great controlling rays proceeding from the universal powerhouse. You ask, then why does man upon the earth not receive in full these two controlling factors, i.e., wisdom and love? The answer is that by his own self-centered will, man has lost the power to do so. Once the inherent qualities of the Godhead lay within man, then by his own will he dissipated them until they have become but a vague memory, yet one which still binds him and causes him to seek his God in one form or another through all his restless pilgrimages. So the next part is February 17, 1954. It is necessary for us to give you some preliminary preparation for that which we wish to have recorded. At each transmission we propose to give you one thought upon which to dwell until the mind comprehends it, and the expansion then takes place in consciousness, whereby the next transmission may be made. We have worked for years, as man counts time, on the intangible radiances which light our way through underground tunnels, and by means of which we communicate with each other. We have found such radiances, for want of a better word to describe them, to be in form a substance which contains an inner glow visible only to the eyes of those prepared to receive the inner light. It may be compared with the sight of the blind, which is through the sensitivity of the impulses of perception rather than through the sense of sight. We have discovered that our sensory perceptions have become highly developed by our recognition of their potentials, and because of the great need for a means of communication other than that of the senses used by man in the ordinary forms of contact. Thus, in place of speech, hearing, and sight, we use radiance. Our attempts at transmission in this way were at first very feeble, but as we clung to the belief that within our underground caves there were vibrations of both sound and light, and that we could use them to transmit thoughts, we became aware that we were actually merged with the magnetic quality of being, a substance which had transmitting power, carrying our thoughts on wavelengths which could be measured, giving forth an essence which could also be used for healing, intensifying our recognition of the life force, and producing within our dark dwelling a radiance which not only enlightens but sustains. It then became our mission to develop the use of such radiations, to find out how they were able to impart powers inconceivable to man, and how we could direct them to the benefit of mankind and of Earth. Radiation means energy, and energy must be transmitted, otherwise it overstimulates the cell life, thus causing damage before due expansion takes place. I'm going to pause and read that sentence again. Radiation means energy, and energy must be transmitted. Otherwise, it overstimulates the cell life, thus causing damage before due expansion takes place. Our primary thought, then, for this communication: the substance of life is visible to those who search deeply. It enlightens, empowers, and in time revolutionizes the thought processes. Next part is March 15, 1954. The invisible substance takes on the quality of visibility to the mind prepared to receive it. In other words, the mind receiving it qualifies it. Okay, still going. I'm sorry. Let me start over. The invisible substance takes on the quality of visibility to the mind prepared to receive it. In other words, the mind receiving it qualifies it, giving it form according to the powers of conception. We use this, quote, substance, unquote, as light, the power to see. We use it as force, energy, the power to do. From it also we mold and bring into form whatever we desire. In other words, undifferentiated substance is the creative potential, ever existent and ever expanding with the concept. Now to particularize, we have found the substance as our light, so we use it as such, guiding our way through the darkness, illuminating our minds, and feeding the cell life of our bodies so that a mere mouthful of food will sustain us for long periods of time. Thus, we live in and upon the very essence of being, because through study and meditation upon it, we have found the eternal substance, which is inherent within all form, and discovered by accepting that we may use it. Having found that upon which we can feed mind, body, and soul, we therefore must find a way to make this revelation clear to man, who is our counterpart, that he may learn its use without having to dwell beneath the earth in order to do so. Our mission, then, in contacting a receptive channel is to transmit, in as clear and concise form as possible, knowledge which will help to illuminate the mind, free the consciousness, and bring revitalizing power to the body so that it may be used as man's vehicle of manifestation for so long as he wishes it to manifest. Next, March 22nd, 1954. In our discovery of the radiation, which is equivalent to inner sight, we found that the substance with which we were dealing appeared as a form of, quote, radium, unquote, which, by the force of our thoughts, might be molded into any form we wished to give it. We believe we have discovered the true substance of being, the light which penetrates even the heaviest of matter, and yet preserves its essence intact, and is available for the use of man as he brings his thought power to bear upon it. Our studies after this discovery became very intense. We wished to find out by what manner of thought we could inspire this radium, to work for us. We knew that it was visible to us only by our deep need and our desire to serve our brothers, even though we were entombed within the earth, condemned to hard labor until we died of malnutrition. It was with this thought that we began our investigations, and over a period of time we found that our physical bodies were responding as though they had been fed by a life-giving elixir. Our skins, normally dark and sodden with hard labor and exposure, became transparent and radiant. We found that we could work long hours, study through the night, and yet remain vital and refreshed as though we had taken a potent vitalizer into our bloodstream. This in itself led us to deeper investigation. We were renewed and restored under the most difficult condition. What then was this substance, and how could it be used to benefit man in his daily living? We began making tests, experimenting by concentration of thought upon the invisible until it became visible in many colored radiations. These were separated as to quantity and quality, and experiments in turn made with them. We found that certain light refractions created certain life-giving qualities. Blue, for instance, was a deeply sustaining quality of being. It had many facets or shades of meaning, but the essence was always the same, to sustain. Oops, sorry. Okay, then May 14, 1954. We are linked with you in deep concentration. We should like to go more deeply into the use of what you call the color-sound radiations, their reactions, and the response of the world of form to them. This is now being tested in many ways throughout the earth and its surrounding ethers. Our contribution is but a small part of the whole, but we make it, knowing that our part contributes a vital element to the mission to be achieved. Our last thought was on the sustaining quality within what we call the color blue, which is in reality a composite of radiation manifesting in an exact degree to form that which we have described as the sustaining quality. There are many shades and varieties of the color blue, each having a separate meaning according to the degree of radiation. But we are now dwelling in thought upon the basic radiation, which in itself is a quality of balance and coherence within the particles of vibratory life composing the earth and holding it in balance. Blue, therefore, must be the major quality of being through which creation is held in form. Thus we come to our central theme. Why is a certain definite shade of the color blue the specific radiation which forms the nucleus or cohesive balancing quality upon which the earth revolves? We shall now attempt to define the specific shade of blue. It is of the color of the heavens on a night when starlight is most radiant, when all is clear, pure, tranquil, yet forever in movement. We also know that this blue may be deepened in some parts of the globe and lightened in others, that conditions of the Earth's atmosphere may change it to your vision, but nevertheless it is the exact degree of radiation which we wish to discuss. Were you able to take that particular and specific shade of blue and analyze it, you would find that it contained an exact degree of radiation of a specific quality of being, that it reflected the calm, steadfast, enduring quality of the Creator of heaven and earth. Were it to be withdrawn and red, for instance, to take its place, the earth would disintegrate in an instant. That's pretty crazy. Okay, so next, May 21st, 1954. As we watch the universe manifest in absolute rhythm, we understand more clearly the need for man to do likewise in every detail of his life. All is according to law and order. Law and order manifest in vibrational rhythm. The eye of man has never beheld the true blue which represents his sustaining force. True, he has seen and responded to many variations which he calls blue, from the radiant blue of the summer sky to the blue which he refers to as a condition of mind, which is depressive and a lowering of his vibrations. He gives recognition, therefore, to the quality of uplift and that of depression in different aspects of the same color. In one, he sees an angelic quality of being, that which lightens and makes him happy. In another, he feels a deep despond, a paralyzing condition. Thus he responds to a vibrational quality within the self-same color. But had his mind been able to recognize the underlying qualities within the radiation described as blue, he would respond only to a strong, steady, serene quality of being which would hold him upon the levels of consciousness in which he might manifest a sustaining power. He would no longer be subject to exaltation in one instant and depressive lowering of vibration in another. He would stand upon his sustaining foundation, mastering and possessing all his faculties of being. This, then, is the esoteric meaning of the color known as blue, the sustaining essence of being. You ask, why then so many variations of the self-same color, and what are their effects? We cannot go deeply into the variations of the colors, but we can tell you that the aura of a being giving forth the radiance of blue will stabilize and render the forces around it vibrationally poised, sustained, and strengthened. thus manifesting the power inherent in the radiance. The thought to be taken into consciousness and mediated upon, is that the radiation of color tone known as blue is the foundation or sustaining radiation underlying all manifestation. In it, we may stabilize our vibrations into control over whatever we bring forth by the power of our thought. Okay, June 14, 1954. In our world of form, there are limitations, but in our world of expression, none. For we know that we can make contact with those who dwell forever in higher dimensions of being and receive from them what is needful. In so doing, we expand beyond the limitations of form into a vast field of awareness which is forever unfolding new vista. Today we wish to share with you another aspect of the color-sound radiations. We know that you have used the term sound as the basic equivalent of color. We prefer tone, for tone applies to sound and to color as well. The sweet sound of an evening bell gives off a radiation which is many-colored. Each tone is a variation of its own. Thus, tone implies color, shading, and vice versa. Having found the sustaining substance within the light, we are now aware of much that is as yet a mystery to the mind of man. We have found a basis upon which to rest our findings, a knowledge that substance is inexhaustible, usable always to the degree to which man gives recognition to it, and with the degree of radiance indicated by the color tones. Thus, if we choose a clear, pure blue, as of the night skies, we can rest at ease in its essential power to hold and sustain, while we make trials of the potentials within the color tone radiations as they are presented to us. You ask, why are they presented, for what reason, and to what purpose? We can only tell you that after a nightmare of loneliness, of being cut off from all communication, so it seemed with our world of form, we began to pray earnestly for a reason as to why we were so entombed. What was the purpose? Had God deserted his faithful servants? Were we to be cast into darkness for the rest of our mortal lives, unable to serve him? Were we to be beaten and kicked, crucified unto death without being able to defend ourselves in any way? At the end of a torture beyond description, the answer came, not as we had expected, but by a light appearing in a corner of our underground hovel. First a mere flickering, then a clear radiant blue beam. At first we rejected it, believing it to be the hallucination of a distorted mind. But all saw it, all were led to contemplate and ponder upon its meaning. It had no unearthly glow, but was clear and strong. It became, after weeks of study, a symbol, a star of hope, brilliantly blue, shining in the darkness as a beacon light, leading us onward. Thus was the symbol given us. Thus were we prepared for what was to follow. This is July 8th, 1954. Our next step, therefore, was to find means of conveying the results of our investigation into a level or layer of consciousness, i.e., vibratory thought waves, at which the scientific mind could absorb them and pass them on to the mass consciousness in such form that they would appear to be a part of the natural existence of man on earth. But before the initial step could be made, it became apparent that man was bent on destroying himself under the illusion that he was creating weapons of protection. This involved further, more dynamic action. A way must be found of distributing the radiation of color sound into large areas and by means of phenomena which would attract the attention of the mass mind, causing it to think in terms beyond the accepted concept of manifestation on earth levels. We by no means wish to imply that we are the inventors of the so-called spaceships, but by deep concentration on the radiations which are transported by them, we came into contact with them and were able to widen our studies and to help bring about the present manifestation. Okay, 30 minutes. I think I'll read for maybe an hour. We're almost halfway through. Okay, August 27, 1954. Now we shall proceed to transmit a specific thought for you to reflect upon. I hope the microphone's okay. The mind of the individual and the field of consciousness to be explored must be attuned to an exact degree before release of radiation can take place, and before the light waves, traveling at a specific rate in circles, can reach the consciousness and expand it to accept the ideas thus projected. Thus, each solar being on each ship of any given flight must be illuminated or receptive to radiation in specific degrees before flight experiment is permitted. The speed of the light wave has to be considered because the higher one goes into fields of light, the greater the speed, and it could be compared to being struck by a bolt of lightning, unless the whole of the being is prepared for such transmission. Once the specific degree of radiation is established, it becomes a group voltage, and a color tone may be sent through the field of transmission and directed to create certain specific effects. September 6, 1954. You have been experimenting with what you call color tone and its uses in affecting changes in the earth and within the ethers surrounding it. We shall attempt to give you a definite thought form in regard to the use of so-called color tone. You may take it thus. All is light. Light is radiation. Radiation becomes color and or tone. The two are equivalent. Example. The light descends. It descends in circular forms from the point from which it is spontaneously projected. It is an intense white light, heat, in parentheses, but as it continues to expand in circumference, it becomes slowed down in relative motion and appears to take on both color and tone. Or, more precisely, it radiates as such to the consciousness that comprehends it. Premise. It must then have a point or apex in degree in order to that it may be released in form, or as specific light waves. It must have an objective, or there would be no purpose in releasing it. It must manifest according to its nature, which reveals itself according to the degree of receptivity. Its manifestation as color and tone carries with it specific degrees of radiance, which are related to the qualities of being as understood by the human mind. Therefore, in order to become aware of the qualities inherent within the degree of light so released, man must become conscious of the reason for projecting it upon, through, and around the planet Earth. Thought. Were man to realize that peace is an inherent quality within the mind of God, that it has color and tone in balanced degree, that it is being radiated through the ethers by dedicated servers known as light bearers, that it may be absorbed as one would absorb sunlight by receptivity to it, then man would soon end his warring tendencies and become one with the quality of peace in radiation. October 16, 1954. Conflict in the mind of man is followed by conflict in the elements. The etheric envelope of the earth can only be harmonized by an exact degree of radiation from the causal realms, linked with an harmonious vibrational condition as a projection of the consciousness of the man of earth. You ask, how is the vibrational condition achieved when man is agitated, fearful, and insecure? It cannot be. However, the descending substance, parentheses elements, cannot be deterred by the state of consciousness in which man finds himself, and their releases are constant. The color tone, which is their quality of being, will eventually do its work. We spoke of the color tone quality of peace, the sustaining power of the blue radiation, but neither the color tone nor quality can be effective unless the mind receptive to them harmonizes with them. Okay, October 30th, 1954. Learn to harmonize all conditions around you by learning to absorb the incoming color tone radiations and to release them as a subconscious habit. Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to read it again. Learn to harmonize all conditions around you by learning to absorb the incoming color tone radiations and to release them as a subconscious habit. Were children taught the meaning of the color tones as they are taught to read, vibrational harmony would be established very quickly. All ideas come from the mind of God, or the universal realms of the all-knowing. Therefore, man is at liberty to draw upon him at any time, testing and substantiating his findings by manifest evidence. Our desire is to bring the cosmic or higher dimensional response into form for the use of man on earth in the transitional period which is now a part of his progress. We can do so in several ways: by directing radiations which help to expand and quicken the understanding, by placing on record, as you are now doing, the findings which will help to substantiate that understanding, and by a process of light descent into the pooled reservoirs so that the solar substance may be drawn upon in time of great need. After much study, it has been revealed that within each colored tone there is a principle of being, a quality which is in essence the very nature of being. We have said that blue is the foundational substance and that the substance of being reflects the color blue. The quality of substance is strength, reflected in tone throughout the stratosphere, and the etheric light wave currents surrounding the earth. Each major color of the spectrum is a reflection of the qualities within all being, and each is as a lighted lamp to the man of earth so that he may see his way into the vaster expanse of being and harmonize with it. The tonal qualities of the spectrum are only vaguely grasped by the human mind. Man feels inharmonious, ill at ease with his surroundings, but blames it on some condition, person, or thing. He fails to realize that harmonizing with the etheric light waves would bring him relief and recognition of the potentials within the tonal qualities of being. He has to be taught by absorbing the radiations and becoming aware of the possibilities within them by carefully prepared instruction as to their use and meaning. Radiation must be felt before it can be seen. It must be directed into the etheric consciousness before it can be felt. A study of it must be placed on record so that the mind of man may contemplate the written word, thereby confirming that which has reached him through his vibrational response. November 12, 1954. You are to remember that the all is the one mind, and that the one mind is in all, over all, and through all. Thus, whenever a contact is made through deep faith and in the belief that results will follow, then the being becomes receptive to the channels through which the one mind is active, i.e., the initiates. No man comes to know the Father until he has learned to still the being to receptivity to the indwelling presence. It is through this stillness that he comes to recognize his oneness with the all-knowing. Then no matter how he receives, or through what channels, he is receiving direct from the mind of God. I am a pure channel through which the ideas of spirit flow. I can measure my growth by my response to those ideas. Throughout the ages of the earth, there have always been men who have known the truth, who have had access to the so-called mysteries, who have been sent to perform a mission among their fellow men, and who have done so through sacrifice and suffering in order that the light might penetrate the darkness, finally meeting no opposition and thus creating light paths which could easily be followed by the man of earth. The time is now again ripe for these light bearers. The great overlighting ones are carefully preparing the way for the fullness of light to shine upon the earth. It is only through careful preparation that it may be done, and that man will see himself as the Son of God, and therefore be able to create his own kingdom of peace and harmony. Today, let us take the color tone of yellow. Its meaning to you is joy, freedom, release from burdens, a spontaneous rhythm which is completely relaxing. Can this color tone be released in great volumes over, into, and through the Earth planet? Would it be possible for the consciousness of man to receive great quantities of joy, to relax in them as he would in the sunshine of a warm sandy beach? Think on these things. November 20, 1954. Now, as to the use of solar radiation as we have tested it in our workshops, solar radiation is applicable to all which appears in manifestation, yet is in itself an invisible condition of being, relating to the movement of the life forces throughout the universe. Thus is it distinguished from what you know as solar substance, which is a vitalizing quality of being, now being released into the Earth's ethers for the specific purpose of enhancing and transforming all that pertains to Earth manifestation until a planet becomes enlightened. We have found our underground dwelling, which has been extended far beyond the knowledge of those by whom we were incarcerated, completely illuminated by a bluish quality of light, which took on a variety of colorings according to our thoughts, or in response to our spoken word. This seemed proof to us that we were inducing by our thought forms, or by our tone of voice, certain light reflections. These changed only when we changed the principal character of our thought projections. For example, Despair or dark brooding thoughts carry with them heavy grayish-black coloring. Longing for outside world conditions would bring with them greenish-brown lights which were distracting and very unsettling. Greenish-brown lights. Physical conditions of pain or lack of ease would reflect in a sulphurous light, which gave off an odor as well as color. Sulfur. If the tones of our voices were weak, uncertain, speaking of lack, fear, irresolution, or any quality unlike that represented by faith, the atmosphere around us would produce a kind of singing sound which was extremely irritating, lacking both harmony and rhythm. Now we're getting to the good parts. Okay, November 27th, 1954. The first results of our findings were negative because we were prepared only for the negative. Oh, there's thunder coming. We worked through many testings and much which was apparently detrimental before we began to be aware of a vast field of exploration which could and did open new vistas of livingness for us. Our first awareness that we were actually responsible for the conditions in which we found ourselves was when, after deep prayer and a united willingness to improve our situation, we found that we were overlighted by a presence, a very great presence, full of color, who began speaking to us. As he spoke, we found that we were able to see his radiations. They were brilliant beyond belief, so brilliant that we were unable to face them, and knelt in our darkened cave, overcome with awe and a premonition that we were entering the kingdom of heaven. This belief brought with it the thought that we were about to lay aside our physical bodies, and a great fear came upon us. We begged to be allowed to stay in our world of form, no matter how limited, until we knew more and could be of some use in it. The Presence again came and spoke to us. He said that within each of us was the power to overcome death, that we might dwell in bodies of light and bring that light to mankind, were we willing to make the sacrifice. He reminded us that he had gone from the cross to the tomb, where he had lain in darkness, deprived of bodily functioning. Let me read that part again, because this is about Jesus Christ. Okay, he reminded us that he had gone from the cross to the tomb, where he had lain in darkness, deprived of bodily functioning. He then told us that the Spirit, whom he knew to be the greater self, spoke to him and admonished him, reminding him that he had cast out devils, healed the sick, and restored the blind to sight. Was he then to permit his power to be dormant because he could not function in a physical form? His was the great testing, for through the power of the Word, he had to resume, His was the great testing, for through the power of the Word, he had to reassume the form which had been laid out in so-called death, and prove to the world that this was possible. He began then to use that power, deliberately calling forth the elements which made up the physical body. He knew the power of the Word, but this was his supreme test. He continued to visit us and to give us details of that supreme experience. We were still afraid to face the great Master, but with each visit a flood of light filled us, and we were aware that we were seeing in the dark many wonderful colors, that we were hearing tones which awakened the cell life within us to renewal, that we were where we were for a purpose, and until that was fulfilled, we could not go. December 3rd, 1954. It was some time before we could bear the radiance which proceeded from our beloved. The rhythm was such that we could not rise from our knees, much less face the light that came from him. But his gentleness and the love that came to us as a living force finally empowered the cell life of the soul being, and we came to gaze upon his beautiful features and to listen to his voice in the stillness as we visibly expanded under the radiance. His first instruction to us was that we were there for a specific purpose, that we had been chosen to make this experiment, and that he would help us to understand the lives which made this life possible. He explained in simple terms, in our language, that we were to reattempt what he had accomplished 2,000 years ago, so that man might have understanding of the light and might come to live in it and express himself through it. He told us that his earthly life, as recorded in the New Testament, was to prepare man for this test 2,000 years later. He also told us that the New Testament record was incomplete, partial, but that as it stood it had become the Word for man through the centuries. He also told us that he had never left the earth, that his presence was known of many, and he appeared in many places to give help where it was needed, making himself known to those who were ready to seek him in form, and by means of his radiation, to those who as yet could not see. There's the thunder right there. He told us that through the centuries since his recorded appearance, we had served in many capacities, doing his work as it was given to us to do, that our testing was a supreme one, for what we were called upon to endure might ultimately destroy the physical body if we failed to perceive that we dwelt in light, no matter how great the darkness of the earth. But he also told us that he could not have come to us had we not been able to accept in faith the radiations preceding his coming, and that now our work would be shown us day by day. It's almost an hour, so I'm going to go a little further. January 7, 1955. After our Lord and Master had presented himself to us many times, and we had become accustomed to his vibration and to the resulting force, which not only enlightened our cavern, but filled it with such positive radiance that we were transmuted to another plane of activity, we became aware that we were actually bringing into form various manifestations of the healing, restorative powers of such radiance. For instance, one among us had, for a long time, been the victim of running sores which proved unhealable, but by the visits of the Master and the resultant penetration of our darkened dwelling with color sound vibrations, the sores were healed and the skin became pure and translucent in appearance. One of us was blinded and sat for days in darkness. His sight was restored, and together we received the baptism of the Holy Spirit, which permitted us to see the inner planes and to carry on our work through them. Many were the transformations that took place in mind and body. Our emotional life was now stabilized, and we were able to dwell in the inner kingdoms without struggle, bringing forth our findings with clarity and ease. In time we discovered how to make use of the solar substances and were permitted to experiment in fields hitherto unknown to us. We found that bird life responded very quickly, being vibrantly in rhythm. Birds were trained to become responsive to our tests. Some became messengers, carrying the radiance to our comrades who were imprisoned above ground. Others were sent on errands of mercy to far distances, taking with them the healing light. We were shown great fields of dwarfed and stunted trees, and plains where nothing of life seemed to be maintained. We tested the solar substance with great care, and found response in full-grown verdant trees, grass, flowers, and vegetation hitherto unknown to us. These testing grounds of the earth plane may be uncovered soon, so that the eyes of man may see the transformation. I can't stop reading. I'm almost halfway through. I'll just do one more part. February 4th, 1955. Our response elucidated the power of the color sound radiations communicated by the Holy Presence, and their effect upon us and upon our surroundings.